To save money before graduating from the orphanage, Lena had learned to live a double life. By day, she was an ordinary quiet girl who followed the rules, attended classes, and kept her head down. By night, she became invisible, slipping out through the old side gate that the guards rarely watched. She had discovered early on that dreams alone did not feed you. When you leave an orphanage, no one waits for you with open arms, no one promises safety. You are given documents, a small allowance, and told you are free. Lena knew that freedom without money could quickly turn into hunger. She was 16 when she found her first under-the-table job. A small grocery store near the bus stop needed someone to wash floors and unload boxes after closing. The owner did not ask questions. He paid in cash, little by little, and Lena hid the bills inside an old textbook with a torn cover. Each note felt heavy with meaning. She counted her savings every night, whispering numbers like a prayer. Enough for winter clothes. Enough for food. Maybe enough for a month of rent if she was lucky. The orphanage staff warned them constantly about danger outside. Bad people, police, trouble. Lena listened but still went. Fear of punishment was nothing compared to fear of standing alone in the cold after graduation. She had seen older girls come back crying, asking for help that no one could give. Lena promised herself she would not be one of them. One evening, after a long shift unloading crates, her hands aching and her back stiff, Lena walked home through a narrow street lined with old apartment buildings. The air smelled of damp concrete and exhaust. She was tired, thinking only about sleep, when raised voices broke through her thoughts. Near a dimly lit entrance, an elderly woman stood pressed against the wall. A man loomed over her, his voice sharp and impatient. "You think you can just ignore this?" he snapped. "You owe money." "I don't owe you anything," the old woman said weakly, clutching her worn handbag. Her hands trembled. Lena slowed her steps. Her first instinct was to keep walking. She was small, thin, easy to scare. She had been taught to avoid trouble, to survive by staying unnoticed. But something in the woman's face stopped her. There was fear there, but also dignity, like someone who had already endured too much. The man grabbed the woman's arm. "Don't lie to me." Before Lena could think, words burst out of her. "Let her go." Both of them turned. The man laughed when he saw her. "And who are you supposed to be?" "Someone who's calling the police," Lena said, though her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure they could hear it. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "There are cameras here." It was a lie, but she said it confidently. She stepped closer, placing herself between the man and the woman. For a moment, Lena thought he might hit her. She felt small and foolish. But nearby windows began to light up, and someone leaned out onto a balcony. The man cursed under his breath, released the woman's arm, and backed away. "This isn't over," he said, pointing at the old woman before walking off into the darkness. The street fell silent. Lena suddenly felt weak, as if all the strength had drained from her legs. The old woman sank onto the steps, breathing heavily. "Are you all right?" Lena asked. The woman nodded slowly. "Yes. Thank you, dear. You didn't have to do that." "I know," Lena said honestly. The woman looked at her more closely now. "You're just a child." Lena smiled faintly. "Not really." The woman introduced herself as Anna Ivanovna and insisted Lena come upstairs for tea. Lena hesitated. She had rules. Curfew. But something told her this night mattered. She followed the woman into a small, tidy apartment that smelled of old books and chamomile. The furniture was outdated, but clean, every object carefully placed as if it carried memories. As they drank tea, Anna Ivanovna told her story in fragments. She had once been a teacher. Her husband had died years ago. Her son had moved abroad and stopped calling. Recently, someone had started harassing her, claiming she owed money for repairs she never agreed to. She was afraid to involve the police. Afraid of being alone. Lena listened, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. No one ever talked to her like this, like an equal. When she finally stood to leave, Anna Ivanovna pressed a small bag of pastries into her hands. "For the road," she said. "And thank you. You reminded me that not everyone has forgotten kindness." Lena returned to the orphanage late that night, but she did not regret it. She thought about the woman's apartment, about the quiet dignity in her voice. Over the next weeks, Lena found herself stopping by again. Sometimes she carried groceries. Sometimes she just listened. Anna Ivanovna never asked questions about the orphanage, and Lena never offered explanations. They existed together in a simple honesty. Helping the old woman cost Lena time and sometimes money, but it gave her something she hadn't known she needed: a feeling of being needed. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. One afternoon, Anna Ivanovna asked Lena if she would help organize some old documents. As they sorted through yellowed papers and photographs, Lena learned more about the woman's past. Diplomas, letters, pictures of a younger Anna standing beside a man in a military uniform, both smiling at the camera. "You were beautiful," Lena said softly. Anna Ivanovna smiled. "Life was different then. I taught literature. Words mattered." "They still do," Lena said. A few days later, a well-dressed couple visited the apartment. They introduced themselves as distant relatives of Anna Ivanovna. They had finally returned to settle family matters and were shocked to learn about the harassment. Lena watched quietly as they spoke, noticing how often Anna glanced at her. Later, when Lena was about to leave, the woman stopped her. "I told them about you," she said. "About what you did." The couple exchanged looks. The man smiled. "We run a small publishing business. We've been looking for someone honest and hardworking. Anna speaks very highly of you." Lena froze. She did not trust easy miracles. "We can offer you a legal part-time job," the woman continued. "And when you graduate, full-time. Help with housing too." Lena's throat tightened. For the first time in her life, the future did not look like a blank wall. Graduation came sooner than she expected. The day she left the orphanage, Lena carried one small suitcase and the textbook with her hidden savings. She did not need all that money anymore, but she kept it anyway. It reminded her who she had been. As she stepped into the street, Lena thought about that night, about a moment when she could have walked away. She realized that defending a stranger had not been an accident. It had been a choice. And that choice had quietly changed everything. To save money before graduating from the orphanage, Lena learned very early how to be invisible. She moved quietly, spoke only when asked, and never complained. By day, she was like everyone else, standing in line for breakfast, attending lessons, listening to teachers talk about adulthood as if it were something simple and guaranteed. By night, she became someone else entirely. When the corridors grew silent and the lights were dimmed, Lena carefully slipped on her worn jacket and crept out through the side exit, the one with the loose latch that only a few of the older kids knew about. She hated lying, but she hated the thought of the future even more. Graduation was coming. Everyone talked about it like a celebration, but Lena felt only fear. She knew the stories. Former residents came back sometimes, pretending they just wanted to visit, but their eyes told the truth: confusion, exhaustion, regret. Some had lost their documents, some had been cheated out of their allowance, some simply could not survive on what the state provided. Lena watched them and understood one thing clearly: money was not happiness, but without it, freedom was an illusion. Her first job came by accident. A woman from a nearby cafe noticed Lena lingering near the back door one evening and asked if she wanted to earn a little by washing dishes. The pay was small, the hours long, and her hands burned from detergent, but Lena said yes without hesitation. From then on, she took any work she could find: cleaning stairwells, unloading delivery trucks, sorting bottles in a warehouse. She learned how to look older than she was, how to answer questions without saying anything unnecessary, how to hide exhaustion behind polite silence. She kept her savings in a fabric pouch stitched into the lining of her bag. Every bill mattered. She counted them almost every night, not out of greed but out of reassurance. The money was proof that she was doing something, that she was not helplessly waiting for life to happen to her. Sometimes she imagined a tiny rented room with a kettle, a window, and a door she could lock from the inside. That dream was enough to keep her going. One evening, after finishing a late shift at a grocery store, Lena walked home through a poorly lit street of old apartment buildings. Autumn had settled in fully, bringing cold air and wet pavement. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself, already thinking about how many hours of sleep she could steal before morning roll call. That was when she heard shouting. At first, she tried to ignore it. Trouble was dangerous, and danger was a luxury she could not afford. But as she passed one of the entrances, she saw an elderly woman pressed against the wall, her thin shoulders hunched, her handbag clutched tightly to her chest. A man stood too close to her, blocking the way, his voice harsh and impatient. "You've been warned before," he said. "You don't get to decide when to pay." "I told you, I don't owe anything," the woman replied, her voice shaking. "Please leave me alone." The man reached for her arm. Something inside Lena snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly. She thought of her own fear of being cornered, of having no one to stand up for her. Before she could stop herself, she stepped forward. "Let her go," Lena said. The man turned, surprised, then amused when he saw a thin teenage girl standing there. "Go home, kid. I'm calling the police," Lena said, raising her phone. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt dizzy, but she forced her voice to stay steady. "People are watching." That part was mostly a bluff, but it worked. A curtain moved in one of the windows above them. The man swore quietly, released the woman's arm, and backed away. "This isn't finished," he muttered, then disappeared into the darkness. For a moment, neither Lena nor the old woman moved. The street felt suddenly empty and very quiet. The woman sat down on the steps, breathing heavily. "Are you hurt?" Lena asked. The woman shook her head. "Just scared." "Thank you, dear. You were very brave." Lena almost laughed at that word, brave. She felt anything but. Her legs were still trembling. But she nodded politely. "My name is Anna Ivanovna," the woman said after a pause. "Would you come in for a cup of tea? I'd like to thank you properly." Lena hesitated. She knew she should go back. She knew she might get caught. But something in the woman's eyes, a mix of gratitude and loneliness, made it impossible to refuse. She followed Anna Ivanovna upstairs into a small, clean apartment filled with the smell of dried herbs and old paper. They sat at a tiny kitchen table, hands wrapped around warm cups. The apartment felt calm, almost protected from the outside world. Anna Ivanovna spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. She told Lena she had been a literature teacher once, that her husband had died years ago, that her son had moved far away and rarely called. Recently, a man had begun demanding money for supposed building repairs, using fear instead of documents. "I didn't know who to ask for help," Anna Ivanovna admitted. "People don't like to get involved anymore." Lena listened quietly. No one had ever told her such personal things before. When she stood to leave, Anna Ivanovna packed a few pastries into a napkin and pressed them into Lena's hands. "For later," she said. "You look like you don't eat enough." Lena returned to the orphanage late and received a warning, but she barely heard it. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Over the following weeks, she found herself visiting Anna Ivanovna again and again. Sometimes she helped carry groceries. Sometimes she fixed small things around the apartment. Often, they simply talked. Anna Ivanovna never asked where Lena lived, and Lena never explained. There was an unspoken understanding between them. Those evenings became a quiet refuge for Lena. For the first time, she felt seen not as a problem or a responsibility, but as a person. Anna Ivanovna asked her opinions, listened to her thoughts, praised her intelligence. Slowly, Lena began to believe she might be more than just a survivor. One afternoon, Anna Ivanovna asked Lena to help sort through old documents. As they worked, Lena discovered certificates, photographs, handwritten notes. She learned about books Anna Ivanovna loved, about students she remembered decades later, about a life that had once been full and meaningful. A week later, a well-dressed couple came to visit. They introduced themselves as distant relatives who had finally returned to handle family matters. They were shocked to learn about the harassment and immediately promised to involve lawyers. Lena stayed in the background, unsure if she should leave. Before she could, Anna Ivanovna took her hand. "This is Lena," she said simply. "She protected me when no one else did." The couple looked at her with interest. They asked a few careful questions. When they learned Lena was about to graduate and had no family support, they exchanged glances. "We own a small publishing business," the man said eventually. "We're always looking for responsible people. Would you like to work with us? At first part-time. Later, full-time." Lena felt like the room was tilting. She nodded, afraid to speak in case the opportunity vanished. Graduation day arrived quietly. Lena packed her few belongings, including the fabric pouch with her savings. She still carried it with her, not because she needed it now, but because it reminded her of her strength. When she stepped out of the orphanage gates for the last time, she did not feel free yet. But she felt something new: direction. As she walked down the street, Lena thought about the moment she had chosen not to walk past a frightened old woman. She understood now that sometimes the smallest decisions change everything. And for the first time, the future did not terrify her. To save money before graduating from the orphanage, Lena learned how to disappear in plain sight. She moved through the building quietly, always aware of the rules, the schedules, the watchful eyes of adults who believed discipline could replace family. During the day, she was obedient and unremarkable, sitting through lessons, answering when called upon, keeping her thoughts to herself. At night, when the corridors emptied and the echoes of footsteps faded, she became careful and alert, listening for any sound that might give her away. Fear followed her everywhere, but it had become familiar, almost useful. It reminded her why she had to keep going. Graduation was supposed to mean freedom, but to Lena it felt like a cliff edge. She had seen what happened to those who left unprepared. Some returned weeks later, thinner and quieter, asking for help they were no longer allowed to receive. Others vanished completely. The orphanage provided documents, a small allowance, and instructions that sounded good on paper but rarely worked in real life. Lena understood something many adults refused to admit: without money, independence was a myth. She began saving when she was 15. At first, it was just coins she found or small amounts given for extra chores. Then, one evening, she gathered the courage to accept a real job. A cafe owner near the bus station needed someone to wash dishes after closing. He paid little and asked no questions. Lena worked until her fingers were raw, hiding her age behind silence and a serious expression. When she received her first folded bills, her hands shook. It was not the amount that mattered. It was proof that she could rely on herself. After that, she took whatever work she could find. She cleaned stairwells that smelled of damp concrete, unloaded boxes from delivery trucks until her arms ached, sorted recyclables in a freezing warehouse. She learned to judge people quickly, to recognize who would exploit her and who would simply use her labor. Every bill went into a small fabric pouch she had sewn into the lining of her bag. At night, she counted the money slowly, carefully, not out of greed but out of fear that it might disappear. Each number whispered was a promise: food, warmth, a place to sleep. She rarely allowed herself to dream, but sometimes, when exhaustion softened her thoughts, she imagined a tiny room with a window, a kettle on a stove, and silence that belonged only to her. No inspections, no shouting, just space to breathe. One cold autumn evening, after a long shift at a grocery store, Lena walked home through a narrow street lined with old apartment buildings. The pavement was wet, reflecting yellow streetlights. She pulled her jacket tighter, her body heavy with fatigue. All she wanted was to lie down and close her eyes. That was when she heard raised voices cutting through the quiet. At first, she ignored them. Trouble was dangerous, and danger was something she could not afford. But as she passed an entrance, she saw an elderly woman standing pressed against the wall. Her coat was thin, her shoulders hunched, her handbag clutched to her chest as if it were a shield. A man stood too close, blocking her path, his posture aggressive. "You've been warned," he said sharply. "I don't care about your excuses." "I told you," the woman replied, her voice trembling. "I don't owe you anything." The man reached for her arm. In that instant, Lena felt something tighten inside her chest. She recognized the fear on the woman's face. It was the same fear Lena had felt too many times: cornered, powerless, unseen. She could walk away. No one would blame her. Survival often meant silence. But her feet stopped moving. "Let her go," Lena said. The man turned, surprised, then laughed when he saw her. "Go home, girl. This doesn't concern you." "It does," Lena replied, raising her phone. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought she might faint, but she forced her voice to stay calm. "I'm calling the police. People are watching." It was partly a lie, but not entirely. A window curtain shifted above them. The man hesitated, cursed under his breath, and released the woman's arm. "This isn't over," he muttered, pointing at the old woman before walking away into the darkness. The street fell silent again. Lena felt her legs shaking, the delayed reaction to fear. The woman slowly sank onto the steps, breathing heavily. "Are you hurt?" Lena asked. The woman shook her head. "No, just frightened. Thank you, dear. You didn't have to help me." "I know," Lena said honestly. The woman looked at her more closely now. "You're very young." "Old enough," Lena replied with a faint smile. "My name is Anna Ivanovna," the woman said. After a moment's hesitation, she added, "Would you come in for some tea?" "I'd like to thank you." Lena knew she should refuse. She was already late. But something in Anna Ivanovna's eyes, gratitude mixed with deep loneliness, made it impossible. She followed her upstairs into a small apartment that smelled of dried herbs, books, and something warm and familiar. The furniture was old but clean, every object carefully placed, as if it carried memories. They sat at a small kitchen table, hands wrapped around warm cups. The quiet felt safe. Anna Ivanovna spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. She told Lena she had been a literature teacher for most of her life. Her husband had died years ago. Her son had moved abroad and stopped calling as often as he promised. Recently, a man had begun demanding money for supposed building repairs, using threats instead of documents. "I didn't know who to ask for help," Anna Ivanovna admitted. "People don't like to get involved anymore." Lena listened without interrupting. No one had ever spoken to her like this, as if her presence mattered. When she finally stood to leave, Anna Ivanovna packed a few pastries into a napkin and pressed them into Lena's hands. "For later," she said gently. "You look like you work too much." Lena returned to the orphanage late and received a warning, but she barely heard it. Her thoughts stayed with the small apartment and the quiet kindness she had found there. In the days that followed, she visited Anna Ivanovna again. Sometimes she brought groceries. Sometimes she fixed small things around the apartment. Often, they simply talked. Anna Ivanovna never asked where Lena lived, and Lena never explained. They shared an understanding built on respect rather than curiosity. Those evenings became a refuge. For the first time, Lena felt valued not for obedience or usefulness, but for who she was. Anna Ivanovna asked her opinions, listened to her thoughts, praised her intelligence. Slowly, Lena began to imagine a future that was more than just survival. One afternoon, Anna Ivanovna asked Lena to help sort through old papers. As they worked, Lena found certificates, photographs, handwritten notes. She learned about the books Anna Ivanovna loved, about students she still remembered by name, about a life that had once been full of purpose. A week later, a well-dressed couple visited the apartment. They introduced themselves as distant relatives who had returned to settle family matters. They were shocked to hear about the harassment and immediately promised to involve lawyers. Lena stayed near the door, unsure if she should leave. Before she could, Anna Ivanovna took her hand. "This is Lena," she said simply. "She protected me when no one else did." The couple looked at Lena with interest. They asked careful questions. When they learned she was about to graduate and had no family support, they exchanged glances. "We run a small publishing business," the man said eventually. "We're always looking for responsible people. Would you like to work with us? At first part-time, later, full-time." Lena felt the room tilt slightly. She nodded, afraid to speak. It felt unreal, like a door opening she had never known existed. Graduation arrived quietly. Lena packed her few belongings, including the fabric pouch with her savings. She still carried it, not because she needed it now, but because it reminded her of who she had been and how far she had come. When she stepped out of the orphanage gates for the last time, she did not feel completely free. But she felt something new, certainty. As she walked down the street, Lena thought about that night when she could have walked past a frightened old woman. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. By choosing to protect someone else, she had unknowingly protected her own future. And for the first time, the road ahead did not terrify her, it invited her forward.